All right, welcome everyone at the next Multi-Network Community Sync. Today is May 29th, and I have one item to talk about, the multi-network CRD approach that we all agreed last week. I have some update from the SIG networking discussion, so I want to share with that. If you have any other topics to kind of touch on, I'm sharing the link to the doc I'm sharing in the chat. Give me a sec. Where was it? Here. All right. And I'm not sure how many of you been at the SIG networking last week. I think the one kind of concern is that DRA is not fully set in stone. That's the kind of problem. So we are kind of building on a quicksand, basically, moving to kind of a bit of a moving target. But I think, in my opinion, we should go for it regardless. Any other thoughts on this, on that kind of aspect?
Hey Marsha, sorry I
Yeah.
missed the last meeting. I was off for last 2 weeks. Was that last meeting recorded where we
Yeah.
concluded the DRA is not the right
No, no,
for?
no. The last meeting we concluded that I think the diagram is here. So we concluded that we are pursuing the DRA and
Got it.
CRD approach.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So we are going with the DRA, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The thing here I'm calling out is that because I went through the SIG networking with that decision and basically discussion, I want to kind of trigger a discussion on this in the SIG networking. Luckily, there was not so much of agenda, so that was a good time to do that. And I think one feedback, I think there are two. Antonio was referring to that the CNI is being called by the CRIs, right? So container
Correct.
runtimes, and basically those. If any changes we would want to do in terms of like the health checking of CNI, and what I mean by that is there is a network, what's called, I think, network
Status?
ready condition
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
node, which is reported by CRIs, which
Mm-hmm.
basically on the other hand go by default look at the CNI path and see whether there is anything over there. I think there is an alternative now today to this. You can run some gRPC to your CNI and get the status as well. So basically, this is something that with approach for DRA we would want to feed into or somehow replace that. I'm not sure how that can possible. So this is something that he mentioned, that CRI is the one that we'll have to discuss about this. We have Michael here, so maybe the KNI can be the thing that will glue this all together and push us towards that kind of enablement. But I think what we can take out of this, it is something that will probably take time for us to fully embrace, and this is what I want to kind of discuss on next step for that. And the other aspect was the DRA being a moving target today, at least. We have some version of it in 130, and I think I didn't get a chance to attend yesterday's work group. Anyone was there any notions, was there any progress in regard to DRA? Anyone knows?
I was part of the yesterday's meeting, at least the first half. They were trying to talk about. So John has created a scope doc for what is included in 131 and what is not. I believe, and I still have to go through the doc in detail, but I believe, and I missed the last 2 weeks, so I don't know. But I believe all the networking specific asks, especially the major ask is to get networking devices attached on a pod level versus a container. That is in 131. Go ahead, Zappa, if you have more information because you have been involved in both.
I just had a question of clarification, Mache, really fast. the multi-network CRD that you're proposing would be referenced by the DRA device class, correct? Or
Yes.
no?
No.
Okay.
So it's like in this diagram. This is well. Let me. Can you see this? Maybe no. Maybe let me just go to. Here. Share this slide. This, Michael. Basically, I'm not sure what. So this is. I'm borrowing this from what Lionel did with his POC on this. Basically, claim template going to support network CRD, right? That will be the path I'm thinking to achieve, right?
So
And then yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say because the DRA terminology sometimes confuses me, so I may
Yeah.
be incorrect here. Because I thought the device class is what referred to like a config map or a custom resource.
So that was
That's
in
claim.
the proposal, Michael, from
So
John.
I'm
So
old
let's yeah. So keep in mind because that's the confusing part. I think John tried to brainstorm from scratch what the API could look like, and they get pushback from Patrick on this, and I think they stacking to whatever Patrick come up with in 130. So they don't want to change that for now. And the one that Patrick says is this. But keep in mind as well with John's proposal that was device claim or something. It wasn't called claim. It was device claim or something else. So
device class.
yeah,
Device, yeah.
exactly. So that's not. I think that kind of got scrapped, and at least that's my take on this. And from what you're saying, what's getting in. Now, was there anything else beside that? Are they going to go with that? Maybe because I haven't attended yesterday meeting, so I don't have much of a. Where's the agenda here?
Sorry,
So
There's the
Masha, I missed
file,
it.
but that's it.
So in this very diagram, do we need pod network CRD? We don't, right? The device claim should
So
be enough.
okay, so you haven't attended. The reason for having the CRD to have the reference, have a standardized object which we can then take, for example, to Gateway API. That's the reason for having that. I agree with you. We could not have it, but it will be a hard sell point to, let's say, enable services in the future. Everyone coming with their own CRD, right? Network attachment definition. Having something that's in the Kubernetes org, some sort of pod network object that is standardized and everyone is agreeing on that references to this, then you have some common ground, and this is something that we can then go to Gateway API, for example, and ask, can we have that field for this guy so that we can enable multi-networking for Gateway API? And the same we can go with there is V2 network policy discussion. We can go there and ask for the same thing, right? Which is a CRD as well. So that's kind of the reasoning behind this additional object.
Okay, would that be beneficial if we write some kind of example how the claim template YAML would look like in a pod and how the pod network CRD will look like?
Yeah, we definitely can. We need some sort of a probably initial design for this. That's a fair point to kind of describe this. I will try to maybe refactor the copy paste the cap doc that we had. Let me come back here. So we have I need to find, oh yeah, this guy, phase one, this guy, this is doc. I will try to make a copy of it and maybe refactor that to include that and see and add some stuff, because I would, and basically the starting point I would say could be the pod network that you propose in core, right? And then we can build on top of it. I think that can be this kicking off point, so that we don't have to, we can go ahead and do something about this, right? So that's where my kind of that's where my next topic comes in, right? What to do next? I think to kind of first want to get and create that repository, multi-networking repository in Kubernetes org, where we can start prototyping things, right? Create some structure to the folder, and then at least define the Go code for pod network, right? So that we can have something, okay, what we think that can be, and then try to create that chain that we propose here with probably Lionel's example to kind of do that kind of POC with that, and see what we can just have that, right? And then based on that, we can build on top of it and define some define tasks for like create a controller for that to handle like basic conditions, any additional logic that we would want to include. That basically what we had in KEP, try to include some of the logic in that controller that will be still in that repository. Create a proper structure for that so that we don't have to import the whole thing, and we can independently import the APIs, and we don't have to kind of spread things into multiple separate repositories. So I want to take care of that, kick that off, so that we can start building on top of that, right? And see where we go with this. And this is with the kind of an asterisk to all this, because based on what Tim said last SIG networking, this is still a moving target, the DRA aspect, right? So this is something that we need to take with a grain of salt on whether that's gonna be, will that pan out the way we want it? Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Should we do some poking around DRA at the same time to try to influence the way it is or the way the API will look like? Because, for example, what we discussed before was the claim should be done in the pod level, not on the container level.
So
we want to have status in the claims.
Right, and I agree. So from Nehas, let me share that. Let me see that. Oh, there is a lot now. We need to read through that. So no, I don't want to discuss that. Then there is the DRA 131 scope. I think there's something that we can all everyone individually can go over and see. But from Nehas update, that's supposed to be in, right, Neha? The global, I'm referring to the global.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. I still have to confirm the scope from the scope doc, but that's my understanding that that needs to be in. If that is not in, then we need to pursue them to get that in at least in 131, because that will otherwise push our multi-network story to 132. So we need to push it if that's not there.
But
my
Lionel, I agree
understanding
with
is
you.
that
It's perfectly,
yeah. In yesterday meeting, like Antonio mentioned the status, for example, but they had no idea how to implement it so far. But maybe we should like try to poke and influence how to solve this problem.
Yeah, okay. I think my always the easiest go-to point is create a new condition. Allow us to create custom conditions. Condition has a lot of fields which we can define and use as at will. I don't think we need to have any rocket science or have a specialized set status there. We just need a field with the text or even few, right? So if we can have conditions and we can create our own, then we are all set up. That's I kind of that's my easiest way out for this, because it's all standardized. You can create as many as you want if you allow it, of course, because that's where it boils down to, and you can ensure that you can create any conditions, or basically some specialized, which some, I don't know, custom condition A, so that you maybe don't create multiple but one, but then anyone can create that one, right? So, and this is where we would trickle in and would say, okay, that's going to be our conditions with some data in it, right? Because I don't think we can push for, let's say, IP address in a status, because that's not really something that a claim should have, right? Because it's a very specific for us. So I don't think I wouldn't, if I were the owner for DRA, I wouldn't allow that. I wouldn't want that, because that's too specific for one of the kind of specific use case, right? That's my kind of take on this, and basically we can prototype that. Any thoughts on such approach? Are conditions good enough, or that's too deep in the object to kind of dig in and then retrieve? Any thoughts on anyone's using status?
In that case, it seems a bit generic because at the same time, anyone could re-implement multi-network entirely and then have different fields in the status.
And that's perfectly fine. They are all at will to do that. But I think we as a community, then we will drive our multi-network. I'm not sure whether we should lock that, Lionel. I don't see that as a problem, right? If someone wants to do that, then yeah. Are you afraid of, or are you saying someone can override that condition? I'm not sure which.
No, I was just saying, like, you have the IPs and then you want to create services. You cannot fetch the IPs for this network because in that cluster it is implemented this way, and in another cluster it's the IPs.
So this is where the controller
IP
comes
address.
in, right?
Yeah.
So this is where in the repo, what I'm thinking, this repo will have. Give me a sec, Doug. In this repo, you will have a definition of the pod network and a definition of a controller that we agree on and we kind of standardize around. And that controller, it's same like network attachment definition. Try to create and it created a standard basically, right? So this is something that here we will now do on maybe on Kubernetes level, so that every vendor, and now I think have in mind, for example, Multus can kind of trickle in to have a standardized way, and then the same repository later on can have a endpoint slice controller, its own, which then understands that, okay, I know how that works, and then you can reuse that guy, right? So so then you will have all those other pieces for that will properly come together and create a fully fledged service for you. Does that sound?
Yeah, seems fine. Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of how I saw it, because if we have our own repository with our own CRD, then we are kind of very flexible and we can do whatever we want. But we then we define the standard and we create controllers for that standard, right? And this is just and I want to ensure that we can build those things in such a way that someone, I'm not sure anyone can create their own controller, but basically apply to the standard that we kind of defined, right? Where the status is in such a way and in this object, and then basically you need to, if you want to do some tweaks to how this behaves because my implementation does this and that, then you can just copy paste the code or basically create your own controller that's going to do the same thing, but with the small change that you want, right? So I want to give that flexibility to anyone. If they, I would want to create controllers that are kind of if you can use them as they are and as a kind of generic approach for the problem, right? If you want to do something more custom, copy paste that and do your own right version of it, right? That's how I would imagine that could help work. Doug?
Oops, missed the mute button. So yeah, originally I wanted to tack on with what Lionel is saying, that is like having a standard that people follow, I think is good and makes for like a more cohesive community experience for folks when they're checking this stuff out, they're trying it in labs. I mean, it was originally an intent of Network Plumbing Working Group to like come up with net attached app as a standard in order to like prevent the like fracturing of this stuff and balkanize it and make it so everyone else is coming up with their own thing. It's just not very portable and it's not a great like community experience. So I mean, the approach that you're saying, Mache, I think is probably fine, but I think that having some level of standardization here is great. Like, and it's a tough line to walk because It's like since day one with this effort, it's like if we over specify things, then we're never going to catch everything. We still need a way to like overload it and have implementation specific stuff. But then if we have everything there, then we're going to have like a bunch of stuff that people don't use. So tough line, but yeah, having some semblance of like a standard way of doing this, I think is good. And Lionel's point about services is just spot on. So yeah, that's my 2 cents, and thanks.
Yeah, I'm trying to write down what can be the next steps to do. And all that we mentioned, right? Set up the repo, create a design out of the cap, and create some code for this. And I like your idea, Lionel, about let me call out the things that we want to POC. Pod level claims, right? And multi-networking status in claim. I think those 2 things that we would like to have set up, right? And that's fair to kind of POC those things out to see what can be done and test it. Any comments to this? I think as a starting point, this is I think good. Any other items anyone would like to add or mention or change?
For the default network, how do we have to handle it? Because
so this is something that currently we need to look at what's possible, and maybe we just follow what you did, Lionel, for your POC. From what Antonio mentioned, this is on a CRI side, right? So I'm not sure whether we can do some sort of quick hack to kind of get rid of whatever CNI does. I'm not sure. I don't remember what did you do, Lionel. Did you just create a dummy CNI config, or how did you kind of disable the CNI?
I modified containerd and then
okay.
I removed the network status, the node network status, and I removed the call to CNI.
Got it. Okay, so there you go. So we have POC around that one at least. So now we just need to ask Michael, can we get it in containerd? But putting that aside, we probably need to come up with some proper plan around this. And Michael Zapp, I have that's probably a question to you. Do you think this should be part of the CRI, some effort of inside the CRI, or do you think we should just pull this into KNI?
I'm debating how, yeah, because if it's it wouldn't just be a question of containerd, it'd be like a question
Sure.
of like, yeah, CRI and containerd. Can you summarize what were we putting in? Because this would be in part of the runpod sandbox CRI, right?
So this is something that I'm still missing, and probably Lionel, you can chip here in on at what point the DRA is being called. This is what I'm kind of vague about. I haven't dig into DRA on that lower level there. So is that on that part DRA called, or is it outside of that?
DRA is it was the CDI device that was added when we were calling container create or create container, remember? Because it was the only thing that was available at that time.
It's part of the create container config.
Yeah.
Okay, so there, Michael, right? So then there's that, but what we need to achieve, we'd like to achieve is, and I'm not sure where that can happen and how, but we would like to achieve a case where if we see a pod network reference somewhere, or there can be some sort of API to kind of flag this. Doesn't have to be through that, but maybe there is some ways we can kind of standardize on how we could flag such situation. But in this special situation, I don't expect the CNI to be called, and I shouldn't. because CDI will take over, right? The CDI part will handle the multi-networking then, right? And of course, I assume there are some consequences to that because of status, for example. But there's something that then the CDI could handle, right? In some ways, whether that's gonna be done by the multi-networking agent or driver, they're called drivers, right, Lionel? By the multi-networking driver that could handle the status in some ways, or and I'm hand waving here a lot because I'm not so familiar with this. This is something that I assume we need probably, Michael, your expertise here to kind of get us some hints on what would be the best way to approach this, especially when you have the K9 in mind, right? Whether, because this is something that you were thinking of taking over by K9, right?
Yeah, and I think there's probably going to be a roadmap approach here because conceptually right now, yeah, DRA is mainly looking at some container scope construct and we're proposing something pod level. So CDI actually kind of, does it get the job done? Yes. Is it odd? Yes. So I think I think there's going to be a short term and a long term approach.
Yeah.
I think long-term approach is that run pod sandbox is probably doing way too much. It's doing creation and start logic. And there's the proposal that will be going out, I don't know, whenever, is to decouple the start and creation logic into two separate RPCs, create pod sandbox and start pod sandbox. So it follows the same pattern as the container lifecycle. So that may be an opportunity to look at how that could play in, because I think that was the main driver of like the device working group, I believe, was to say, hey, we need to look at this from a pod level perspective versus a container level construct. So I think we have a lot of flexibility here. But yeah, I mean, like if we need to just say, as a simplistic example, we just want to short circuit and not execute the CNI. That's actually quite trivial to do because we could easily say, how do we flag disable it? Now it could be done driven by Kubernetes to say, hey, we pass Kubernetes over the CRI, passes something to the container runtime, says, hey, we're not going to use the CNI. We could do it down and dirty with an annotation as like a POC approach. I actually have done that before. And then, the heavy lifting, small lift, is changing the pod sandbox status method. And Lionel probably also knows this, that we just simply need to not return pod IP and the additional IPs field and handle that part of the sync pod in kubelet, in the Kuber runtime manager code, because that will ultimately fail right there. There's some also, when the sync pod function is called in Kuber runtime manager, it also detects like, is the network field populated on pod sandbox status, and that would, if that's nil, that re-triggers a rescheduling of the pod in an endless loop. So there's like small changes we would need to make there. I'm sure we can get creative in the roadmap, but there have been, I mean, regardless, those changes need to be made if DRA is gonna fully encompass its scope. So we might as well burn dual thread that effort.
And sounds good. All right. So yeah, that's what I would think. So I think that's sort of some sort of POCs around that, what's possible. I think, Lionel, most of the stuff what you did, we can build on top of what you did and go from there to what can we do and what will be the most kind of kosher, proper way to do this so that we can push it towards the in the core, right? And as you said, right, this can be a flag or something to kubelet to state CNI enabled or CNI disabled true. And then we just basically, whenever we have our multi-networking repo, we'll say, whenever you want to use this, you have to have kubelet, this flag set in kubelet or something along those lines, right? So then we can kind of match and how you kind of integrate this whole thing together.
Yeah, there would need to be some sort of communication that needs to drive, like, are we using X or Y?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's like, people are like, well, if you do it in the container D or the container runtime config, and then the kubelet's not aware. But, I think, yeah, it's just the pro and con discussion. I think, they're
Right.
all solvable. I mean, luckily from a POC perspective, I don't think we don't need to leverage any changes to the Cry API
Mhm.
initially, unless we need to get the network namespace path, but we can do that through the CDI currently.
Yeah, that sounds fair. All right. I think that kind of sets us up on some stuff to do. We need owners now. I think that's where we are at the stage. Is that okay, or that we still need to have some discussion on what can be driven by who? Can we spread some of those items across this group? And I don't want to kind of push anyone on top of that, but basically, if we spread things, then things gonna get move faster than they. If just, I'm gonna definitely look at the creating the repo and the kind of setting up the kind of spine for that, like the basic kind of folder structure. I think to have that I have in mind to kind of properly set up the imports later on in the future when we want to kind of import separate things separately. And then work on that design doc to kind of sort that out. But I think, Lionel, are you okay with driving those pod level claims that the POC for DRA you called out?
I have no idea now how to do it, but
Sure.
I can look into things. Antonio mentioned NRI last time to inject interfaces.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what the NRI is. Anyone? This is yeah. He was calling that out. Yeah, but I'm not sure what's that.
The node resource interface. So the short summary is it's implemented in both Container D and CRI-O, and it's effectively a synchronous hook solution. We'll use Run Pod Sandbox as an example that we can actually say, okay, prior CNI execution, we want to call out over gRPC to another running process to manipulate the pod sandbox configuration, or say the CNI configuration and more. So it effectively passes the entire pod object over gRPC to another running process to do some sort of hooking. I need to go do something prior this pod or this network being set up. So there's an entire thing that Patrick Flint, I believe, and some people at IBM and Intel are driving to do some changes around networking as well. But you can do it around Run Pod Sandbox, create container, start container. There's hooks all over the place for the container runtimes.
Okay, so there is that. I think the status, I gave you some idea, Lionel, right, on the status. If we could, I'm not sure whether the claim has a condition field, whether they use conditions. I hope they are. And basically that will just boil down to be able to define your own type of condition, right? I think that's what it will boil down to. And then, what do you think?
I think there was condition in the resource claim, but I need to look into it more. I don't remember exactly.
So, and the question is whether the type of conditions can be anything, right? Or is it hard coded? Because I know, like, for pods and nodes, there is a specific set of conditions you can define, and that's it. There is nothing else, right, beside those set of conditions, and that's for a reason by design. So here we'll have to come up with something whether that's the same approach was taken for the claims as well, or maybe they currently just shortcut it and just they have just some constant defined, but they don't limit to anything else beside that, right? So or unless I'm wrong. So that's something that needs to be looked into and then follow up on that. And the pod level claims, this is something, yeah, we need to figure out to kind of what the approach, whether it's an NRI or something else to kind of achieve that. I think the other items are dependent on getting the repo in, but then anyone wants to kind of kick off when I get the repo in, and I kind of the basics of the stuff, then probably I can definitely create as well. That's going to be the first kind of commit to define the pod network. And the question maybe to this group, is there any, do we want to revisit the pod network? It's so basic anyway, but do you want to revisit this object at all? Let me see. Let me show this guy here. Where were you? Share this tab. Yeah, this guy here. So our object pod network has enabled and provider. So basically we were supposed to use class. I'm not sure whether we want to go there to even further create number of objects, but the object is very straightforward. Do we want to revisit? And keep in mind, this is not set in stone, and this is CRD, so we can. We are more flexible in terms of expanding. So I would want to keep it as simple as possible at the beginning, and build on top of that, right? Any other opinions on that? Going once, going twice. Okay.
As long as we keep the CRD backward compatible, they are tricky. If one,
that part I agree. Yeah. So
yeah.
This definitely won't be a V1. It will be alpha for now, but yes.
Oh yeah.
So
of course.
for now, we will assume alpha, and this will not be kind of. I know even the alpha, some folks can use it in production, but hopefully not. And then we will have a disclaimer that the standard process that Kubernetes does in terms of the APIs, they can change, right? I think I'm just gonna, since we had discussion on the provider, I think I'm gonna cut out the provider, and we can add it when we need it. But for now, I would just say we're gonna have a pod network and parameters reference for now, just to kind of keep it simple. And as you said, Moshin, to kind of get the backward compatibility in case we want to really introduce the classes instead of the provider. So then we have the kind of free will on doing that. Okay. Any other comments, topics? I think this is kind of the next step. With this, I think at least we can move forward and kind of finally write some code after, like, what is it, 2 years, 2.5. So luckily we can have something to show about this kind of this community's effort. Any other topics to add?
Just a question, Maciej. I wasn't last week, but I looked at some notes from the SIG network, including also the device management and so on. What is the proposed way forward with the Gateway API? And my question is that today, the CRDs and the whole API does not have a so-called service concept. It understands the ingress object, HTTP proxy, TCP routes, and so forth. It's a little bit, let's call it a different way of handling the so-called exposure of the services outside the cluster.
So from what, if you think, maybe one step back, you can watch Tim's, I think that was a lighting talk he did, like a 5-minute. You can, I think even I pointed out maybe here somewhere. That was in Chicago last November. He did a very good presentation on the service object. And at the end of the whole presentation, basically the whole presentation is all about how bad a service object is. And at the end, he said, what is the solution? And the solution for that is Gateway API. Basically, how I think this is something in the back of everyone's mind. The problem with Gateway API and pursuing that is there is already a service, so why bother, right? So that's the problem. We are providing a new use case where basically that could be the driver for doing L4 stuff. And I think this is where what you're referring to today. All of this is always the routes are basically L7, right? Most of the time. I think they G8. I saw an email yesterday or a LinkedIn announcement from Rob. The new version has gRPC route, right? So as you can see, we can build. What we need is TCP route, UDP route, cluster IP route, maybe. So this has to be defined how that will look like, because the type, for example, of what service it was, it doesn't have to be maybe a field again inside the routes. It can be another route, right? There can be a cluster IP TCP route, and there can be load balancer IP, load balancer TCP route, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is something that needs to be defined. It's not straightforward, but that's how kind of I am seeing this. This is not something that's going to happen overnight or in few months. This is a longer term thing to do, but that's how I'm seeing it. That's where the kind of future for this would look like, right? Where I think multi-network can be the driver to enable the L4 routes in Gateway API with multi-network, and then eventually maybe we can obsolete services altogether, right? That's kind of, I think, the gist of this, right?
Thank you. No, it makes sense. No, it was exactly, I was talking with some people and we said that gateway API will have to be extended to be able to
Yeah. No,
cater
definitely. So because when you think about this gateway API, there's a gateway object that defines some IPs and some listeners and some grants on who can or cannot reference the gateway. There are classes, and then there are routes. So maybe I was calling out classes, but maybe the type of a service can be a class as well, right? So you can put things in various places and kind of something that the community has to agree on. And of course, the Gateway API folks, they know how to do that best. So that has to be discussion with them. And Shane was here last week. He was asking for, can we have a discussion on this on their meeting? So that's something that's definitely has to happen and drive it, and it has to be a separate routes, right? I think the objects TCP route, if you Google for it, it's already there, but it's not fully kind of defined, and that's what's missing, right?
Great, thanks. Now L4 will be promising to look into.
Any other topics?
Just in the continuation of this topic, there is the policy, network policies to look into. And
right.
I tried the Gateway API with new L4 routes using Multus.
Okay.
In the tomorrow's meeting, I was planning to have some demo about it.
The networking working group meeting.
The plumbing group, the networking plumbing group.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's the same. Okay. All right. So thanks for letting us know. That's something that's worth noting, and that's awesome. Let me add that. TCP route, is that correct?
In my case, it's more L3, L4 routes.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's just some concept that to try.
And
Gateway API is just to open the discussion. It's and see how it was working.
All right. The L3, L4, by the way, this is something that even I was thinking of having an L3 route as well. So L4, it's basically TCP, UDP, gRPC, or any other, gRPC, that's TCP. But basically, one of the TCP, UDP, that's just L4. And then even going lower, right? Because there are cases where, and there are already caps to do an all port service in Kubernetes, right? Which was, I think, was not pursued, but basically it's L3. And basically you would want to have that. So that's where the gateway API is so good, because then you can come up with yet another route, which is L3 route, right? And does that for you. So that's something that back in from my point of view, Google's point of view, we have a use case for L3 route as well to expand on top of that, right? So if we were to figure out L4 route, then creating L3 route where all the traffic is pushed through would be just a next step, and kind of something that definitely to have. And good, thanks for reminding that, Lionel. But yes. Network plumbing working group, right? That's there. I think I got it right. All right. Yeah, this sounds great, Lionel. You're getting yourself busy. Any other comments? Any other topics? All right. Give you 8 minutes back. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you as well.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.